Welcome to the debate. Every single day, a city like, New York requires enough food to feed 8 million people.
It is a massive, almost incomprehensible number when you really break it down.
Right? Just think about the sheer logistical impossibility of that for a moment. You have perishable goods, highly specialized diets, the exact timing of delivery trucks trying to navigate terrible gridlock.
And nobody is actually in charge of it.
Exactly. If you were to put a single, supposedly brilliant central planner in charge of organizing that daily delivery, the city would likely be starving within a week.
Oh, absolutely. The bottlenecks would be immediate.
Yeah, yet
Without any overarching authority, without a master schedule, the shelves are stocked, the coffee is hot, and the city thrives. So it forces us to confront this profound question. Does private self-interest inherently lead to the broader social good? Or do the inescapable limitations of free markets demand structural intervention to prevent widespread ruin?
Well, it is really the defining tension of how we organize human civilization. We look at the sheer scale of modern commerce and we have to decide, do we trust the momentum of decentralized greed, or do we recognize that complex systems fundamentally require a referee to prevent them from, destroying themselves?
And I take the position that the decentralized market driven purely by self-interested behavior functions much like a massive decentralized neural network. It is the most robust, flexible, and honestly efficient mechanism we have ever discovered for achieving the social good.
And I take the position that this so-called neural network is constantly training on deeply flawed data. The pervasive reality of market failures proves that self-interest frequently and sometimes violently diverges from the optimal social outcome. So intervention isn't just some political preference. It is an absolute mathematical necessity.
Let's ground this in the foundational premise that Adam Smith laid out, over 2 centuries ago with the concept of the invisible hand.
Right. The wealth of nations.
Yeah. The brilliance of Smith's observation wasn't just that people are selfish. That was obvious to everyone. The breakthrough was recognizing that under the right conditions, this selfishness is unknowingly harnessed for the public benefit.
The whole butcher and baker analogy.
Exactly. It isn't benevolence that puts dinner on your table. It is the butcher and the baker trying to maximize their own wealth.
Look, it's a compelling narrative. It really is. But it is fundamentally a theoretical best-case scenario. It assumes a frictionless vacuum.
I wouldn't call the reality of human survival a frictionless vacuum. Think about how we solve the ultimate grinding problem of our existence, which is scarcity.
Okay.
We have limited resources and absolutely boundless human desire. How on earth do we decide what gets made? If you leave it to central planning, as we discussed, you get monumental inefficiencies and massive shortages.
Sure, central planning has its fatal flaws, but
the market solves this through what we call allocative efficiency. We don't just blindly produce goods. We stop manufacturing something the exact moment that society decides the raw materials and human labor would be better spent making something else.
in theory.
No, that isn't just theory. That is the daily reality of millions of businesses adjusting to consumer demand.
I understand the mechanism of allocative efficiency. My contention is that you are assuming the market always correctly measures the value of those raw materials and the human labor.
It uses prices to measure them.
Right, you're assuming the inputs are honest, but what if the market is entirely blind to the true costs and benefits? The invisible hand relies on perfect competition and perfect information. And in the real world, those conditions are practically mythological.
See, I think you are underestimating the sheer processing power of the price mechanism. You say the market is blind, but the price system is actually the most sensitive information processor in existence. It doesn't need perfect individuals. It just needs a price.
Okay, explain exactly how a price tag replaces the need for comprehensive information.
Take a massive shock to the system. Say a devastating frost strikes the Brazilian coffee crop.
Okay, a natural disaster.
Right. The physical supply of coffee beans plummets globally. Now, think about the alternative to a market here. A government commission would have to analyze the frost damage, calculate the remaining global inventory, and literally issue rationing orders to every supermarket and cafe on Earth just to prevent hoarding.
It would be administrative chaos.
Total chaos. But in a market, the price of coffee simply rises.
Because the supply curve has shifted to the left.
Exactly. And that price increase is a localized signal that coordinates global behavior instantly. Some people see the higher price and decide, hey, my morning coffee is worth it.
They pay the premium.
Yeah, but others look at the menu, they wince at the cost, and naturally switch to tea or, energy drinks. The market smoothly adjusts to a catastrophic global scarcity without a single centralized mandate. Everyone's pure self-interest perfectly aligns to ration the remaining coffee to those who value it most highly.
That is a beautiful sequence of events, I'll admit. But your entire coffee frost scenario rests on one massive assumption.
Which is?
That the price is an honest signal of scarcity.
It is a reflection of supply and demand. What else would it be?
It could be a signal of danger. What happens when the buyer is completely blind to the quality of the product they are buying? Your coffee example assumes transparent commodities. A bean is a bean, but let's look at complex goods.
Okay, like what?
Imagine a used car market. The dealer knows the intimate mechanical history of every vehicle on the lot. They know which cars run perfectly and which ones are, complete lemons with cracked engine blocks.
Right.
The buyer, however, knows nothing. They are operating completely in the dark.
So we have an asymmetry of information.
A massive asymmetry. Now, standard market logic, the very logic you just praised with the coffee, says that if the dealer wants to move stagnant inventory, they should lower the price.
To stimulate demand, yes.
But because the buyer cannot verify the mechanical quality of the car, they are forced to use the price as a proxy for quality. If the dealer suddenly slashes the price on a sedan, the buyer doesn't think, oh, a great deal based on a leftward shift in supply.
No, they think something is broken.
Exactly. The buyer thinks, what is wrong with this car? Why is he desperate to dump it?
I see the psychological friction there. The price cut actually destroys demand.
Yes. The mechanism completely breaks down. The lower price actively terrifies the buyer. And the reverse is true too. A dealer might artificially inflate the price of a lemon just to trick the buyer into assuming it's a premium vehicle.
Which poisons the well for everyone.
Exactly. Because of this, buyers become highly skeptical and refuse to pay a premium price for any car, assuming it might be a lemon. Consequently, sellers with genuinely excellent, well-maintained cars can't get a fair price. So they pull their cars off the lot. They pull them off the market entirely. The market enters a death spiral. This creates what we call thin markets, where mutually beneficial trades simply evaporate. The invisible hand is paralyzed by fear.
Okay, I won't deny that asymmetric information creates serious friction, but the decentralized market isn't static, right? It is highly adaptive. If buyers are terrified, there is an immense profit motive for someone to alleviate that terror.
By doing what?
By innovating. That's why the market spontaneously generates solutions like Carfax reports, third-party mechanics, comprehensive warranties, and, brand reputation. A dealer who wants to survive long-term realizes that building a reputation for honesty is vastly more profitable than scamming people once. The pursuit of profit literally funds the bridge over that information gap.
Well, I'll grant that entrepreneurs are clever enough to invent warranties to save their own sales when the buyer and seller are staring at each other across a desk.
Right.
But what happens when the damage isn't happening to the buyer or the seller? What happens when the transaction actively damages a third party who isn't even in the room?
Ah, so you're arguing that the transaction costs aren't fully captured?
I'm arguing that the market clearing price is often a complete lie, because the ledger is missing a massive liability. Let's move away from used cars and look at industrial production.
Sure.
Imagine a factory manufacturing commercial refrigerators. The market reaches an equilibrium where the refrigerators cost, say, $650, and at that price, exactly 45,000 units are sold.
Which maximizes the social surplus. The consumer gets their refrigeration, the producer gets their margin. It clears perfectly.
It clears perfectly for the two people signing the contract. But what if the chemical and metal runoff from that factory pollutes the local river, causing $100 of damage per refrigerator in ruined fisheries, decreased property values, and, human health crises?
The negative externality.
Yes. That $100 is a negative externality. The buyer in another state doesn't pay it. The factory owner doesn't pay it. The local community absorbs that cost against their will.
It is an uncompensated spillover. I agree.
Exactly. which means the factory's supply curve, which is supposedly this brilliant metric of allocative efficiency, is entirely fraudulent from a societal perspective.
Fraudulent is a strong word.
It only accounts for private costs. If that factory were forced to pay for the destruction of the river, their costs would rise and they would produce fewer refrigerators at a higher price. Because the free market ignores this massive liability, it actively subsidizes destruction. The market systematically overproduces highly damaging goods.
Look, it's a fair critique. Pollution is a classic market failure. But you were only looking at the dark side of the spillover effect. Let's flip the ledger for a second.
Okay.
If self-interest creates negative externalities, it also drives the most powerful positive externalities in human history.
How does self-interest inadvertently help the broader society in a way the market doesn't already price in?
Through innovation, through research and development. Think about a tech firm sinking billions into developing a new, hyper-efficient battery technology. They are doing this purely out of greed. They want to patent it and corner the market.
Naturally.
But knowledge doesn't stay contained. It leaks. Engineers change jobs. Competitors reverse engineer the concepts, and entirely new industries spring up around this breakthrough. The self-interested pursuit of profit by one company ends up raising the standard of living for millions of third parties who never paid a single cent for that R&D.
That is true, yes.
The invisible hand doesn't just allocate existing resources. It invents the future.
But you are making my exact point for me, just in reverse.
Wait, how so?
If a company creates a massive benefit for society but cannot find a way to charge people for it, what does the math of self-interest dictate they do?
Well?
They invest less. Economic data is incredibly clear on this. An original inventor usually only captures about a third to a half of the total economic value of their breakthrough. The rest is a positive spillover.
Which is a tremendous windfall for the public.
A windfall in theory, but a catastrophic bottleneck in reality. Because the private firm only captures a fraction of the value they generate, their internal demand for investing capital into new research is vastly lower than what society actually needs.
So you're saying because they can't monetize the total benefit, they pull their punches on innovation.
Precisely. Let's look at the clearest example of this, the flu vaccine. When an individual pays out of pocket for a flu shot, they are buying private protection.
Right.
But they are also acting as a biological firebreak, reducing the transmission rate for everyone around them.
So the marginal social benefit heavily outweighs the marginal private benefit.
Right. But the free market only produces based on the private benefit. Individuals only buy the shot based on their own personal risk calculation. Because the unvaccinated public gets a free ride on the immunity of others, the market will inevitably produce and consume far fewer vaccines than the socially optimal level.
I see.
We are perpetually starved of the things that benefit society most, whether it's vaccines or fundamental scientific research, because the profit motive simply cannot figure out how to bill for them.
I see the tension there. If the market overproduces the harmful things because it doesn't pay the toll, and underproduces the vital things because it can't collect the reward, the machinery seems unbalanced.
Unbalance is a polite word for it. It is fundamentally misaligned with human thriving, which is why I argue that leaving this to the invisible hand is negligent. There are some goods, what economists call public goods, that are strictly incompatible with private markets.
Because they are non-excludable. You can't fence them off.
Exactly. Take national defense. You cannot run a military on a subscription model, because you cannot allow a missile defense system to protect the paying houses on a street while letting the non-paying houses get vaporized.
No, obviously not.
Once the defense grid is on, everyone is protected. This creates the ultimate free rider problem. Every rational, self-interested actor has a massive incentive to let their neighbor pay the bill. And if everyone acts in their own self-interest, the defense grid never gets built.
And you extend this logic to natural resources as well, I imagine.
The tragedy of the commons. Look at the Caribbean queen conch. It's a valuable mollusk in shallow waters. Anyone with a boat and a mast can harvest them. But because nobody holds a property right to the ocean floor, no individual diver has any incentive to leave a conch behind to breed for next year.
Because someone else will just grab it.
Right. If I don't take it today, a rival diver will take it tomorrow. The self-interest you praise doesn't optimize here. It strip mines the resource to the point of total biological collapse. Without collective structural intervention like strict government-enforced catch limits, the market simply consumes itself.
Okay, you have painted a very vivid picture of where the market has blind spots. I don't deny that public goods require collective action, or that open access resources are vulnerable, but I have to push back incredibly hard on your underlying assumption here.
Which is?
You are actively romanticizing democratic intervention while demonizing free markets.
Recognizing the necessity of a referee is not romanticizing the referee. It's just acknowledging that a game without rules ends in a brawl.
But you are operating under this deeply flawed assumption that a democratic government functions as a perfectly rational, benevolent algorithm that just swoops in to fix the math of a market failure. It absolutely does not.
Well, no system is perfect, but
The government is made of self-interested actors too. When you demand intervention, you aren't removing self-interest from the equation. You are just moving it into the political arena, where the outcomes are often far more destructive.
I hardly think setting a catch limit on an endangered species is destructive.
Let's talk about the mechanics of how these policies actually get made. Let's look at public choice theory and the concept of rational ignorance. Imagine a proposed government policy. Let's say it's a massive tariff on imported steel to protect domestic manufacturing.
Okay?
This policy will cost 10,000 everyday citizens $300 each, in higher prices for cars and appliances. That is a total cost to society of $3 million.
A diffuse cost spread widely across the population.
Exactly. Now, let's say that exact same tariff will highly benefit just 2 domestic steel factory owners, giving them $1.5 million each in protected profits, a total benefit of $3 million. From a societal standpoint, the math is entirely a wash. But look at the incentives. Are those 10,000 citizens going to organize, hire constitutional lawyers, take time off work, and fly to the Capitol to lobby against a bill that only cost them $300?
No, the transaction cost of organizing a coalition of 10,000 people far outweighs the $300 they would individually save.
It makes perfect economic sense for them to ignore the politics. They are rationally ignorant. But those 2 factory owners, they stand to gain $1.5 million each. They will hire the most aggressive lobbying firms on earth. They will coordinate easily.
They will exert immense pressure.
They will exert overwhelming pressure on the political system.
Because the benefits are intensely concentrated.
Right. So the government intervenes. But it doesn't intervene to fix a market failure. It intervenes to impose costs on the invisible majority to benefit a hyper-visible, highly concentrated special interest group. The political system operates on a warped version of self-interest.
I understand the threat of cronyism. I do. But that doesn't negate the necessity of intervention entirely.
It goes beyond cronyism, though. It is baked into the structure of democratic policy. Government interventions almost inherently create identifiable winners and anonymous losers. Look at rent control. A city council steps in to quote-unquote fix the housing market by capping rents. The identifiable winners are the people currently sitting in their apartments. Their rent is frozen. They vote to re-elect the politician who saved them money,
While simultaneously chilling the development of new housing.
completely freezing it. Landlords stop building new apartment complexes because the profit margin is eradicated. They convert existing rentals into private condos. The housing supply stagnates.
So the shortage gets worse.
Yes. So who are the losers of this intervention? It's the 22-year-old recent graduate or the immigrant family trying to move to the city next year, who literally cannot find a single available unit. But because those losers are anonymous, because they don't even live in the voting district yet, the political system completely ignores their suffering. The policy remains incredibly popular locally while actively destroying the broader market. So when you offer government intervention as the pristine cure to the tragedy of the commons, I have to point out that the cure frequently creates a far more insidious disease.
Well, I can see that the mechanics of democratic intervention are incredibly messy, and yes, highly susceptible to concentrated lobbying. We cannot pretend that moving a problem from the boardroom to a legislative committee magically sanitizes it of human greed.
Exactly.
But let me summarize my position clearly here. The sheer magnitude of market failures we've discussed cannot be dismissed as minor friction. We are not just talking about edge cases. The chronic underfunding of critical public goods, the existential threat of negative spillovers like carbon emissions, the paralysis of asymmetric information in healthcare and finance, these prove that the invisible hand is fundamentally nearsighted. Self-interest left entirely unchecked optimizes for the immediate extraction of wealth, not the long-term sustainability of society. It desperately requires a structural framework to correct its misalignments.
And to summarize my stance, despite the flaws you've highlighted, the decentralized market remains the most powerful engine for processing human complexity that we have ever discovered. Driven by self-interest and guided by the relentless signal of the price mechanism, it coordinates the labor, innovation, and resources of billions of people without requiring a tyrant to direct them. Yes, the invisible hand sometimes trembles, but relying on the heavy, clumsy, and frankly easily corrupted hand of special interest-driven government intervention to fix every imperfection is a cure that is historically proven to be worse than the disease.
You know, for all our disagreements on the mechanisms, I think we've arrived at a vital point of convergence today.
Which is?
That neither system offers salvation. Neither unregulated hypercapitalism nor heavily centralized democratic planning is a flawless utopia. They are both deeply flawed human tools.
I entirely agree. The great error in economic thinking is the assumption that one side of this debate holds a monopoly on efficiency or morality.
Right. The real work of economics isn't choosing a philosophical side and defending it blindly. It is the grueling, pragmatic work of looking at specific scenarios, whether it's funding a vaccine or regulating a fishery, and honestly assessing the specific vulnerabilities of both the market and the state in that exact moment.
It requires us to abandon the romantic notion of a master engineer, whether we imagine that engineer as an invisible market force or a benevolent politician. We have to look strictly at the incentives and the data. There's an immense amount of depth left to explore here, from the granular elasticity of demand to the sweeping macroeconomic shifts in global trade.
Absolutely.
But for now, we leave it to you, the listener, to examine the friction in the systems around you, weigh the evidence, and decide where the balance should be struck. Keep questioning the machinery of our world. Goodbye for now.